everyone, and welcome back to the Triforce podcast.
Wow.
Yeah, we're doing it.
The most consistent podcast on the internet, TM. We've done it.
Yeah.
We're more consistent than, who are some other big podcasters?
Jeez, I've got no idea.
I don't listen to any others, do you?
Russell Brand. We're more consistent than Russell Brand.
What
who's
an accolade.
very consistent podcaster as well, but I
I
think...
like Russell Brand's podcasts, actually. I think he stopped, though. I think he stopped for a while. He has, he goes on and off.
Right.
He's become, he had a kid.
Okay.
And he's become, a Buddhist, basically.
Okay.
And he did a video on YouTube talking about how to do meditation and stuff and how to do yoga.
Nice.
And he's got a big beard now and stuff. He's gone a bit mental, I think. Well, maybe he's found the opposite. He's gone a bit.
You
less
know what
mental.
I sense?
What?
He's going to start a cult, just like I was saying last week. This is his.
I sense a bit of zeal of the recently converted there.
Definitely.
I've been a Buddhist for 5 minutes, and now everybody needs to be one because it's so amazing.
It's fashionable.
And I've got all these cool things to tell you about it, and it's changed my life, and yada yada yada. That's what I sense. That's what I'm sensing. Maybe that's just me being cynical, though.
Cynical sips.
Yeah, that's right. That's right.
So I got some stick last week because I talked about Mormons, which I still think was hilarious. But some guy on Twitter was quite upset.
You're not allowed to talk about other people.
Well,
so.
You're not allowed to talk about other people's
this
beliefs.
This is his comment, which he then edited for some reason. But I found it interesting because it's a kind of a rambling and angry comment. So he says, cults are just social pyramid schemes. And now I thought that was a reasonably interesting statement. Full stop. Mormon is a slur. He then says that Mormon is a slur? I don't think Mormon is a slur. It's a description of a language.
Do they call it Latter-day Saints?
Well, it doesn't matter because if you Google Mormon, it doesn't say this is a slur. He says it's a slur. Just because it's the common term for several religious groups doesn't mean it is okay.
Oh.
That's definitely not true. I've heard lots of people say, yes, I'm a Mormon. It would be like saying that referring to someone as a Christian is a slur just because you should call me a Protestant or a Catholic. I don't agree with that. But anyway, he says, especially given the large differences between, and then he says LDS, RLDS, FLDS, which all seem like they have the words Latter-day Saints in. So I don't know what the R or the F stands for. I mean, he's basically saying you can't say Christian. You should say Protestant, Catholic, Baptist. Those are the specific versions. They're all pretty much the same thing, guys. Come on. And he says, wow, almost everything P-Flex said is completely wrong, Raffle.
You have heard this podcast before.
Right.
Raffle.
We talk a lot of shit, and we are incredibly hypocritical.
Exactly. So he said he watched the South Park episode and didn't even pay attention. Well, I mean, I missed some of the details. I get that he's generally anti-religion, but seriously,
you half-watched.
Yeah. Would you talk about any other world religion like that? Yes. If you replace the slur Mormon with a slur for the Jewish peoples, would the same conversation be acceptable to you? Seriously, the polygamy was needed because it was legal to murder a member of the church at that time. Check it out. Now, I did check that out.
Amazing.
And I want to respond to this specifically. There was a period, I believe it was Missouri, where for 4 days there was a bill passed that basically said it's open season on Mormons. They either leave or we're going to fucking round them up and kill them, right? This one guy passed this crazy bill. After 4 days, they got rid of it. The Mormons basically left Missouri and went west. End of story. There's no historical evidence that any Mormons were killed as a result of this bill, but obviously if you want to make out that they were persecuted throughout their history, I'm sorry. And also the polygamy...
All of our wives were killed. We had to get new ones.
Right, I have so many questions about the polygamy, that we had to have polygamy because of... I mean, it was not legal to murder a Mormon. There was a very short period in that particular part of Missouri when obviously there was a problem. There was not some nationwide Mormon hunt, right, that was going on. And I just think it's funny because the polygamy was around when Joseph Smith, he was married a bunch of times. And I'm pretty sure it wasn't open season. He was tarred and feathered because people thought he was an idiot and a con man and a liar and all this.
Weirdly, I think calling it LDS, right, is even that reminds me of LRH, like L. Ron Hubbard from Scientology. I think it's an incredibly culty sounding pseudonym.
If you have to acronymize your religion, maybe shorten the name. If it's that long, just chill. And I also think, I just think it's funny that he wants to make out like Mormons are persecuted. They're all pretty well off dudes, as I understand it. You go over there, it's like, the Midwest, they're all white and they wear nice suits and shirts and ties and they give Bibles away for free.
They got their own state.
They do lots of fundraisers as well.
Yeah.
Lots and lots of fundraisers.
They got a whole state. Isn't Utah basically the Mormon state? Is that right?
Pretty much, yeah. They can pretty much do what they want.
They got a state.
Wow.
What are they moaning about? So yeah, I got no problem. I've met some Mormons. They're pretty chill, but they always say like, "Yeah, I'm a Mormon," like, because they're obviously racist Mormons. The ones I've never had a Mormon knock on the door because if they don't come this far, but I've had Jehovah's Witnesses knock on the door before and stuff.
Yeah, we get Jehovah's Witnesses too. They're always really smiley and creepy as well.
Yeah, of course, dude.
I don't know what they're hoping to accomplish by knocking on my door at 9 o'clock in the morning on a Saturday. It's crazy.
I'll tell you what they're hoping. The same thing all these religious people are hoping. God's favor. That's it.
No, they're just, you know what they're hoping for? They're hoping to catch you like on a bad day when you're like depressed or,
what do they care?
You just lost your dog or something. And then that's when they swoop in and mind control you.
That's my point, is that their motivation, there are two motivations. Number one, it says in the Bible you've got to proselytize. So you've got to go out and tell people about God, right? So you obviously got to do that to please God.
Exactly.
It doesn't say this is a really good thing to do and you might help people. It just says you must do it because God says so. And only once everybody has heard the word of God will the second coming happen. So their mission is to make sure everybody hears it because that's when God will come back. Like, there's no fucking benevolence to it. They just know they've got to get the word out there. Bam, 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 hit them. Get those numbers up, people. Let's move. We got to get streets A through Z. Go, 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 go. They're just on a mission.
I think my big beef with religion is that I get the feeling that people who are doing all this stuff are doing it to like get favor for the afterlife, right?
Exactly.
Like everything they're doing is just like, oh well, there's no way I'm going to hell. Like I'm going to be going to I'm going to heaven. I'm going to the palace, and I'm gonna do
God
like
will be so
nice
happy.
Things for eternity and stuff.
I'm gonna get my own locker space.
It just seems a bit. I don't know. It doesn't.
I don't know.
Seem,
like, okay,
that's the feeling I get. I'm pardon my ignorance. I'm sure that people are going to disagree, but that's how I perceive
think
it.
That is an incredibly powerful tool that has kept people in religion. That fear that if they don't do this, then they'll have, they'll fuck it up in the future. But I think part of it is not that necessarily that selfish thing. I think like when I see a guy in town, like, in the middle of the shopping center, like yelling Christian stuff or whatever.
Through a megaphone.
Yeah.
That's how you spread the word of God.
And he's like,
listen to me. The word of God is awesome.
The word of Christ is fantastic, and you will all be going to hell. But usually, actually, these guys are more actually genuinely concerned about us. That they genuinely think I am going to hell. When I walk past a guy in the street, he thinks I'm going to hell, and he doesn't want me to go to hell actually, because most people are nice.
I'd like to think that.
Does he know for sure, though? I mean,
he's very convinced.
It's a kind of shitty way to be, isn't it? Like, it's very judgmental. Who the fuck is this guy to say that you're going to hell or not? Like, what insider fucking info does he have? What, like, God appeared to him in a vision and told him specifically that you're going to hell because you haven't listened to his megaphone broadcasts?
Well, I guess it's more that somebody told him who was authoritative enough to convince him that he believes them and he follows that. So imagine if you had someone who you believe everything they say told you something.
Yeah, my wife.
You were like fully convinced of that, I think, like, for me, okay, I think I figured it out, guys. So,
Lewis has figured it out.
I don't think it.
Lewis has figured it out.
I'm not confident in your figuring it out. I don't think you figured it out somehow.
Listen,
break it down for us, baby boy.
Those Nigerian like phone scams or email
yes,
scams.
I'm very familiar with them. Yes,
with the prince, right?
Yeah,
and who says, "Oh yes,
prince.
there is like $13 million in escrow and all this shit, and we have to whatever, all that shit." Those things are so shittily done that only the dumbest people fall for them. Okay, that's the same with Jehovah's Witnesses.
Oh my God, Lewis.
It's so badly done, and everyone knows that they're coming around doing this thing. Everyone knows it's bollocks, except for that very small percentage of people who fall for it. And the thing is, like, the reason those Nigerian scams are so bad is because they want to filter out everyone who's going to fuck with them or waste their time, right? They really only want that 1% of absolute schmucks who are the most vulnerable people, actually, or the most kind of like elderly people who don't know what they're doing, or are lonely, or like...
Lewis, are you trying to tell us you fell for a Nigerian scam?
So basically, I'm now a Mormon, guys.
Yeah, you feel bad. Well, anyway, welcome to the Triforce podcast, proudly sponsored this week by Jehovah's Witnesses,
by the Church
Association
of
America. Yeah, and the Church of the Holy Redeemer, Latter-day Saints, and the Mormons. We used to, I don't know if you remember Flax when you were in North America, maybe you were too young, but they used to always have those commercials on TV.
Yes, I was literally just thinking about them, because they were on all the time.
The Church of Jesus Christ of Latter-day Saints.
Yeah, Jesus Christ of Latter-day Saints. Yeah,
and they always have like a kid helping an old woman rake leaves in her front yard and stuff. It was always, for some reason, it was always very autumn in all of the ads too. It was never like a hot, blazing summer. It was always autumn. There was
the
always
Mormons in the ads were never just sticky with sweat, dripping, looking exhausted. They've been through 100 houses of people telling them, "Get out of here, fucking Mormons! I wish it was still legal to kill you, you polygamous bastards! Get out of Missouri!" That's not in the advert.
Yeah, no. So it was always somebody raking leaves or helping put leaves into garbage bag.
You know what they always make me think of dentistry for some reason. When I think of Mormons, that kind of sterile, it's gonna hurt, but they're still kind of nice about it, kind of thing. It's like this weird dentistry thing. I can't put my finger on it.
The thing is, I'm not anti-religion. I don't know, like, I don't know where I stand on it. I have opinions
me too.
For and against, obviously, and I don't know where that puts me. Like, I'm not sure if I strictly believe in God, like a glowing man in space or in heaven or whatever. You know, like, I don't know if I believe that. I don't know if that exists. But the idea that people are religious and they form a community around it and they provide services to the community, like support and help and a place for people to gather and be together and do stuff, that I'm all for. I think that side of it is fantastic.
What? This is extremely difficult to calculate, right? The positive impacts of religion are many-fold. They're generally very positive, very nice people. I worked for the church for a couple of years. I worked in an office doing admin for the Church of England at Chelmsford Cathedral, right? And I did it when I came out from university. I was very depressed. And
that's how they get you.
Upset. And well, no, but I was just temping at the time. I worked in Broomfield Hospital for a bit, doing like taking like doctor's notations. So I'd translate like what the doctors had written down into like in dictaphones.
That's a tough job.
and it was nonsense, and it was so difficult to do. Anyway, I did that for a bit, and I did all these other shitty temp jobs, and then I ended up getting a temp job at the church, and they were like, "Do you want to work here?" And I was like, "Sure." And they're all incredibly awesome people who are very almost just they want to make good, and they're very generous with their time. They're always volunteering for positive things in the community. They're a good group of friends. They're very supportive. They raise money for so many good causes. They keep these old buildings, upkeep and keep them all good. And they run these local events. And it's very British, that there's a church fete on the village green, or that there's a priest raising money for the steeple. It's very it's very nice, right?
It's very postman Pat, isn't it?
And to weigh that up against all the negative stuff that you hear about religion, from, paedophile priests to, sort of horrible fucking genital mutilation going on in Africa and all sorts of awful stuff. Like, it's very hard to put these things in the same basket and say, is this good or bad? Like, is it worth chucking the whole thing out, or is there some way to salvage it, or how do we get rid of the bad bits and keep the good bits?
I just feel like people are so fundamentally fucked up. It's impossible to have something nice in this world, consistently nice, free from any form of corruption or just general shittery. Like, you know what I mean? It'd be cool if religion was this sort of bastion of peace and understanding and a safe place for people, but once you get people involved, it never is it? There's always some fucking asshole trying to create his power silo, or do a financial scam, or molest somebody, or whatever, and it just ruins it all every time.
Like,
so
like everything, it's a nice idea that someone and a lot of someones are going to fuck it up in a big way, right? It sounds
There's always
nice.
going to be people fucking everything
nice,
up,
but
right? In any company, in any corporate company, there's going to be bad people running it or doing it or in it, and that's
like
not the fault
I.
of the company.
Great idea on paper. Sounds like a big. All these fucking guys, they fucked it up. Oh my god.
Oh man.
It's a tough one, right? Anyway, let's move on. I had a thing that I read on Reddit today, and I think this comes from being a hypocrite already because I can't write, but I was reading writing prompts, okay? And there was a writing prompt.
Give me a writing prompt, Lewis, right now, and I'll freewheel the story for you. Yeah.
All right, good. Death. This was posted 21 hours ago, but obviously it's a week ago. Death has hourglasses for every person. One day during cleaning, he finds a dust-covered one that had rolled under his desk. Okay?
Yeah.
Go for it, P-Flax. Free ball it.
You want me to come up with a story based around the fact that Death basically lost track?
Yeah.
Okay.
Well, you can... It's up to you how you think.
It's the prequel. It's the prequel to Coco, Disney Pixar's Coco, where the old grandma is clearly about 500 years old, and the hourglass for Coco, the grandma.
Right.
I don't want to spoil anything if you haven't seen the movie, but that's the grandma. Was just sort of forgotten about, and then when he found the hourglass, boom, Coco died.
Damn.
Right.
There you go. I probably would. I'm not going to actually try to come up with all the words because that I don't want to type. It's too loud. But
well, no. Okay.
I'll give you my rough story outline. I wouldn't begin with that opening. I would start with.
Well, you have to though. It's a prompt,
right? But I would start with Death holding an hourglass covered in dust, and then
you go for the dramatic sort of.
You kind of
setup.
work back, and he's thinking about things like his cleaner and stuff like that. So the end of the story should be the fact that he realizes that he's debating in his mind, is it fair at this point? But then he's debating, surely all death is essentially unfair. So does it matter if it comes unexpectedly? And in a way, they've had more time. How does he make up for his mistake? Does he have a master? Like, there are lots of questions that
There's a lot of deep stuff here.
So
well, let me just
that's
stop
not
you before
one
you
you
get
can just
started.
come up with. Oh, go on. You've already cracked it. I've cracked the death story, everybody. Lewis Brindley has cracked the story. Here we go.
I was relaxing in the evening, reading Reddit. This writing prompt was on the front page. I thought that sounds really interesting.
Gently and slowly masturbating.
I was just going to say, surely there's some hand cream involved here.
Yeah.
Okay. And I'm just thinking, because I don't really read writing prompts, and maybe it's a place where people were learning to write. Okay, maybe English isn't their first language, and I'm going to take that. But I feel like if you're writing something on writing prompts, you should at least give it a little bit of a proof. Now, obviously, we live in the days of spell checking. Okay, so it's very hard to make spelling mistakes, but it is very easy to make grammar mistakes, right? And you think that maybe if you're going to post a thing, which isn't very long, it's like 3 paragraphs, you might spell like grammar check the first sentence.
Right.
The first sentence of the most upvoted comment.
All right, hit us.
On this thread, which has 14,000 upvotes.
Let's hear it.
Is this. Do you want to hear it?
Yep.
Yeah.
The actor answered the knock at his trailer door. When he saw who it was that knocked, he said, "I wondered when you would show up. Want to come in?" Death nodded his skeletal head and said, "Yes." The two took seats, the actor in his chair and the skeleton on a long couch. First of all, obviously there was a grammatical error in the very first sentence. Okay, it's poorly written, and it carries on with that level of poorliness.
Slowly moved his head downwards to look at a shifting mass between his legs and said, "Cup the balls, work the shaft."
I don't know which end is the skeleton. He's still got a big old chub on.
Death is Sylvester Stallone. We cracked it. We cracked it.
The next one, okay, is just like what Pyrion would have started his with.
Cup the balls.
I'm afraid you gotta cup the balls and work the shit. Part of the process.
The hour.
You don't cup those balls, I'll give you a war you won't believe. Cup those balls. Yes, Mr. Stallone. Call me dead.
Oh, fuck. Are you ready?
Stallone.
Right, I'm ready.
That's my Stallone.
The hourglass had rolled to his side, its content perfectly balanced on both sides. A potential eternity in the shape of a few still grains of sand. Death rolled it between his fingers, the dry, bleached bones clicking against dusty, bubbly glass. The sand inside was a dark, coarse thing, tinged with the black of volcanic ashes and the red of granite, spelled wrong, dust, clumped by time.
How is granite spelled?
Granite.
With no E. No E.
Oh, with no E. Oh my God, that's a big no-no.
And I mean, that would have gone through spell check, right?
Yeah.
I mean, okay, let me get the next one. The Grim Reaper tracked down the rightful owner, or maybe the rightful property, of the hourglass.
What?
He took a moment to consider whether the human owns the hourglass or the hourglass owns them. After all, can something that controls fate really be called your property?
Oh, give me a break.
It's exactly, P-Flex. These are the best ones. I was like, come on, there's such a good prompt here. But it's all like, Peter woke up. He looked down under his desk and there was an H-shaped glass object there. Peter, also known as Death, picked up it and looked at it with his empty eye sockets into the dark blackness of the twilight realm in which he secretes spirits away to take them from the mortal man.
Boo!
Thomas Mann woke up in his bed and said, "What a lovely day it is today. I hope I don't die." But little did he know, Peter Death would be opening the door to his house.
This isn't an actual
Peter
story.
Death, said Thomas Mann. It is you. Yes, it is I, Peter Death. Death.
No,
Look
you're
at my
making this
robes
one up.
that are spiraling with the blackness of 1,000 nights. It's like
You're making that one up, right?
Of course I am.
Okay.
It's bold like that, though.
that was
it's
good.
like
I
a
was well
5-year-old's
into that.
nonsense.
That's a pretty good made out. I thought you were reading.
Yeah, Pete the Death. That was some real
Fucking hell,
freewheeling
It's like
shit.
Gordon Freeman's brother.
I mean, the thing is, though,
that was great.
props to these people for coming out, though, right? Like, if you like writing
I shouldn't
you
be
know,
a
whatever.
hypocrite.
Like,
Yeah,
I think
props to
it's
them
cool.
for revealing to the world that they can't write for shit. Well done.
Oh, come on. You can't be that.
It must be practice, right, for these wannabe writers. But
Yeah, they're just kids,
I
man. I mean, Jesus Christ, look at my writing. It's terribly written. It's just, if you enjoy it, just fucking do it. But if it's on the internet,
that's
I'm
part
going to
of
flame it. I'm
Bodega, though.
sorry.
That's self-aware. Like, maybe these guys aren't expecting it, but the amount of cocksucking that goes on in the comments on these threads as well. It's like, oh, this is the best thing I've ever read. I burst into tears. I'm like,
I read it's like that about everything, though. Like, literally somebody accidentally falls asleep at their keyboard and, a string of random characters, and that gets gilded and upvoted to hell. Like, it's
People
that's
love
Reddit
that.
for you.
some of these ones are multiple
man.
gold. Some of these stories. I'm like, what the fuck?
I think Lewis was annoyed that it felt like a waste of a good resource. Like, here's this good prompt, here's this great tool that Reddit could be, and instead you got people upvoting and masturbating about something that's objectively bad. And I understand that frustration.
Those three I read were 3 times gold, 1 gold, and 1 gold.
That's
with
pretty shocking.
millions, thousands, tens of thousands of upvotes between them. And it's like, there's a mistake in the first sentence. I mean, come fucking on. Do you know what I mean?
Have you guys noticed, by
break.
the way, that when you start a mail in Gmail now, as you're typing, it tries to auto-complete words for you, like predictive text.
yeah.
You know
Have
what
seen
I
that?
love about Gmail? I love the automatic responses to emails. Like it
Yeah,
can
you can
detect
do.
the tone. Yes, I would love to do that! Exclamation mark. I use them all the time.
I'm
think they're
tempted
great.
to use it, but then I realize other people will recognize these phrases and think, that lazy bitch just fucking pushed yes
that
or no.
just one button pushed for a reply on that one. It was like a big.
Also, there's no
well thought out
smiley
email.
faces. Everyone knows I only communicate in smiley faces these days. That's what you do in 2018.
I like to end most of my sentences with lol and then smiley faces as well.
I use
That's me
Rothful
too.
Mao, even in formal
No,
letters.
I just go lol. Even when it's not funny. It's like, hey, long time no talk, lol.
Lol.
Hope you're doing well. My recovery from my debilitating diseases going as well as expected, lol.
Lamau.
Lamau, yeah.
I guess maybe it's because I've been a little bit disappointed with actual books lately as well, though. I finished Brandon Sanderson's Oathbringer, and I found it a little bit of a struggle to get through at points. And I've just started reading some other stuff, and I'm struggling to
I haven't read
into
anything for a long time. I go through phases though. Like my whole life is weird phases, and they're like seasonal too. Like I find sort of at the end of the summer, September going into October, I want to play a very mindless, grindy game. Like, and if I look back 2-3 years, those are the times where I played a lot of Diablo, a lot of Overwatch, and like it's crazy. Like I can see these patterns like all the time. I find after Christmas, like March going into like June, I am more up for like, you know, a bunch of different games and stuff. Usually over the summer, I tend to watch a lot more TV and movies and stuff, but there's no time in the year for me now to read books. Like that's not part of my cycle unless something really awesome comes by. But
I have actually reread a couple of books that I had read some time ago. I reread The Curious Incident of the Dog in the Nighttime, which I recommend. I think we spoke about it previously. Maybe we didn't. I have a friend of Mrs. F's. Her child is autistic, and the main character in Curious Incident is autistic, and it's an interesting look inside the mind of someone suffering from quite debilitating, levels of autism. But they're all very different. So I had a lot of questions from my friend, and I said, can you hug your child? She was like, absolutely, she loves hugs, but you can't kiss her, because then she's just wiping the part of the face where you've kissed her for like an hour, because she's like convinced there's still something on there and stuff. So it's like, I thought it was interesting to read that now, knowing someone who's autistic. So I thought that was interesting. And I reread The Godfather, which is just, honestly, if you haven't read the book, it's excellent. Because it's like Godfather 1 and 2 in one book, and goes into a bit more detail. So that's very good. And those are both sort of classic books, I'd say, sort of modern classics, if you like. And then neither of them is particularly long, especially Curious Incident isn't very long at all. So those are both worth a read if you haven't read those, I would say.
Do you think like we could get like Gmail to write something?
I was thinking about the Gmail thing, and I quite like the fact that there's no penmanship anymore. Like I used to know people's handwriting, because you'd get a letter from someone, you'd know straight away who it was from the address. You'd recognize the handwriting. Like I recognize my mum's handwriting, my sister's handwriting, Mrs. F's handwriting, and a couple of other people.
Master Flax, salutations to you once again. It is I, lol.
on this Crispin's Day Eve, lol.
God,
it's penmanship. Yeah.
But so the thing is, I think that at least in emails, people have a style of writing. Whether it be putting lol after everything or whatever. But if you have all this predictive text stuff, much like the one-button replies, I feel like it's going to make it a lot more uniform. So people aren't going to have necessarily their own writing style. There's going to be a lot of people hitting tab to auto-complete words and stuff like that, which is a shame. But then, and it also, nobody's going to be able to fucking spell. Like,
yes, that sounds good. Sent from my iPad.
Exactly. I just think it's kind of removing any humanity left from communication by just saying, you know what, we can automate all of this. Like, there's that Google Assistant that will make appointments for you at the hairdressers and things like that. If you didn't see that video, check it out.
I've actually got one of these right open in front of me now, and the options to reply to this fucking email are awesome, thanks for the info, sounds good to me, or that would be great, thank you. They're all so positive. And do you know what? Weirdly, actually, since this has been put in, I have been clicking them more. I have actually been using these fucking Gmail things, and it has made me more nice than I would normally. Because normally I'd be like,
get an add-on to make it negative and have street slang in there as well.
Yeah.
So instead of it being like chirpy and positive and accepting of what's in the email, it could be like, you better go somewhere with that motherfucking bullshit and stuff like that. Like. That'd be great.
There's a Chrome attachment. I'm pretty sure. Yeah, there are Chrome plugins for everything. You get a Chrome plugin to please make my emails a bit more street smart and give them some slang. Lol.
Yeah, you can put some slang in there.
Put some negativity in here. I want to be able to say, no, this is not good enough.
Yeah,
instead of awesome.
What about some Cockney rhyming slang? Like a plugin for that would be really good too. I think that would be pretty funny. Like, you could reply to all of your emails like Phil Mitchell from the hit series EastEnders on BBC One, proudly sponsoring this podcast as well. Oh, man.
Can you imagine if EastEnders sponsored this podcast?
Yeah.
Think of the new viewers or listeners we'd get that would be completely flummoxed.
Yeah, they wouldn't get it.
Can you fucking Adam
I don't understand a fucking word they're bloody saying. These lads are off their bloody rock.
Yo, China.
Oh, my God.
I'm not giving any bees and honey to these fucking mugs.
Bees and honey.
Fucking
it's money, isn't it?
These fucking slags.
So it's cold and flu season, guys. How are you faring? Because I'm on my deathbed here.
Yeah, I've been sick for about
a week.
Whoa. Why
is
it cold and flu season? It's fucking. What's that? What do you mean?
The weather's turned. The kids are back at school. You get 2 weeks after they get back to school.
Didn't you get a whole bunch of pamphlets in your mail saying to get your vaccinations and stuff, and get your kids vaccinated, and vaccinate your dog, and vaccinate your mailman, and vaccinate
any Mormons that come to the house, vaccinate those guys.
Yeah, just vaccinate the world. We all need to be vaccinated again for the flu.
I mean, you have to have your flu thing like annually, like a top up to try and stop you getting the flu. I've never personally had it. The kids get it. Mrs. F gets it, but for some reason I just can't be bothered to walk 5 minutes to the chemist to prevent 2 weeks of miserable flu in the middle of the year. I don't know why I can't be bothered, but
I hate getting sick. I've been sick recently, and it started on my way back from Oktoberfest. I was in Gatwick Airport.
Yeah.
I was just sitting there watching this documentary that I've been watching. It's a fucking the biggest documentary I've ever watched. It's really good. I'll tell you about it in a minute.
Okay.
But and then all of a sudden my nose just started fucking pouring with clear liquid snot.
Ugh.
So I had this mountain of tissues next to me where I was like blowing my nose constantly. Got on the plane and that made it even worse. I was all sinusy when I got home. I had the shivers. I had the sweats, you name it. Fuck,
brother,
it sucked.
I've been there with you for 2 weeks. It sucks. I think I'm coming to the end of it. But you know that moment, I'm sorry to get graphic, but you know that moment when you're blowing your nose and everything's clear for a week and everything's fine. You think, okay, it's not going to be an infection of some kind. And then suddenly you get that really horrible bogies, the yellow bogies, and you think, this is a bad sign because I really don't want this to get worse. No. I thought I was getting better, but now I'm worried. But then I'm thinking maybe this is like the late stage and it's the last battle, the last
or maybe
great
it's
battle.
Like another one that just like
exactly another one snuck in there. It's like is this the end of the last one or the beginning of a whole new horror?
A whole new horror.
Have they escalated the war now? And they just as we were fighting them back, they brought in some yellow reinforcements. You're like, what the fuck? And your body's like, no,
we're on DEFCON 1 all of a sudden.
Pull back to your original positions. You're like, but we're giving up a week's worth of land. We lost so many white blood cells. With pull back. Everybody runs back. Mortars covering fire, smoke grenades. They all dig in.
Resume the bombing campaign.
Not the bombing campaign, so please. We lost so many. No, get on it now.
So anyway, I'm watching this documentary on Netflix. It is a 10-part series, and each episode is between like an hour and a half and 2 hours
Is it
long.
the Vietnam one?
It is. Yeah.
Yeah, it's good, isn't it?
Oh, fuck, it's really good. It's crazy and unbelievable and just really well done. Really well done. I like all the stories of like the people that went and just the general heartbreak behind all of it.
It's terrible. It was terrible.
It really was.
It was a
terrible.
real landmark
and the
in
worst,
America.
the thing that surprised me the most is that they learned nothing from the French doing the exact same thing like 10 years before they started. Like the French literally went through all of the same motions and all of the same disapproval back home. They lost a ton of troops. They spent a ton of money just trying to keep this country subjugated, and they couldn't do it.
I think it's a combination of a lot of... There's arrogance has to be factored in there. We've never lost a war. We're America. How can we lose to Vietnam? There's arrogance in there. There's also a lot of political pressure. This has to work, despite the fact it's almost impossible really to win that kind of war. Like, you had this army and all these generals and everything and this whole structure coming off the back of World War One, World War Two, Korea, and they were much more conventional wars.
Yes.
That they had won.
Yeah.
And it's like, this has worked for us for a very long time. There's no reason to think it'll be any different here.
Well, I guess those wars all had fronts and,
exactly.
you know,
had an enemy that wore a uniform, you had fronts, there were no tunnels, there were no booby traps. It wasn't like that.
Yeah, no, Vietnam was just unbelievable.
Well, actually, there were booby traps. There were booby traps in World War II, but they were minefields. You know, it was like a minefield rather than you walk into a village and some kid throws a grenade, at you. You know, that kind of stuff. And it's like, and also I think the conscription for World War II was, we're going to go fight the good fight. And it's like, we have to defeat these guys. They're the baddies. And we've got other friends who are also on the side of right, and we're going to defeat these baddies, and we're going to free everybody, and it's going to be great. This was much more difficult because originally they didn't have conscription, then they needed more people, and it dragged on, and it was getting less and less popular. It's just
their support
unbelievable.
For the South was insane, really, when you think that not a single government in the south of Vietnam was ever even remotely credible. Like, they were just, you know, generals, corrupt as shit.
Yeah.
Like, you know, they never had anyone decent running the South. Yet they were still, you know, fighting for it because they were just so afraid of communism causing a domino effect in Asia. And
it was like a proxy war, really.
It was. It
was a reason to have a war without nuclear confrontation.
It's interesting because I'd known about Vietnam. Like, we learned about it in school, obviously, and stuff. Like, I went to, like, you know, school in North America, so we had like a big fucking module on it at school. And
did Canada send troops? Did Canada?
I knew enough about
it.
Canada didn't send troops, but Canadians volunteered to fight in Vietnam. So I think there was something like 30,000 Canadians volunteered to fight in Vietnam.
Because you could dodge the draft by going to Canada, right?
It was a big thing, dodging the draft and going to Canada at the time, which I didn't realize. But yeah, a lot of people, as sort of like discontent with the war escalated, more and more people were just like, you know, fuck this, I'm not going. Like, they did like the draft lottery thing Nixon did, you know, where it was like, if you were born in this date range or whatever, you had to go. Didn't matter what class you were from and stuff. So all of a sudden, like, all these people who were sure that they wouldn't ever get drafted, who were just going to go to school and be doctors and stuff like that, were like, yeah, okay, well, you're drafted. So that's
a lot of people volunteered. I mean, there were people that signed up because they believed in it. And they, you know, there was that kind of, I don't want to be a coward, if you like, even though I think being signed up to go and fight a war that you don't agree with, I mean, Jesus, that's
crazy. But I don't know, like, I think like later on it was like that, but at first it was very much, you know, the day and age was, you know, I believe what the president's saying, like, why would he lie to us, sort of thing. Like, I'm going to serve my country, it's going to be glorious, you know, like they had all like the sort of right ideas, but when they got there and did their tours and stuff, they sort of realized that, holy shit, what a fucking mess this is.
We can't win this. And this is a fucking disaster. Everybody hates us here, and we're just losing people.
That's
and
crazy.
We're not achieving anything. You're not gaining ground, you know.
Yeah.
But they had all kinds of crazy schemes, and they had this idea for the sort of fortified hamlet, which is an idea where you get a village and you convert them to your side, and then, you know, that you win the hearts and minds that way because it doesn't work. And
it reminded me a little bit of like The Wire too, with like the stats reporting and the body counts and stuff like that. You know, like how it went from being about something to just being some statistical gaming. You know what I mean? Like,
and
it
also,
was just,
if you think about the war now, in a war now, people would have video cameras and things on them. Even the soldiers would be able to film stuff, vlogs and stuff like that. It would be much harder to silence people, whereas back then the papers were still that they put out to the troops were still like basically propaganda, talking about how they were winning the war and all the rest of it. So it's just crazy to think. It's such a weird time. You know, when I was growing up in Queens, one of our neighbors, Jimmy, who was an Irish guy, like full Irish accent, actually 100% Irish, but was an American citizen, fought in Vietnam. He actually went out there, so he told us what it was like. Yeah, and he was on the base. Like, he wasn't one of the grunts that went out into the field. I think he was one of the rear echelon motherfuckers, as they call them, the Remfs. So I don't know what he specifically did. He worked in computing at that time, but I don't think they had computers out in Vietnam. Anyway, he said, like, when the base would come under attack, you'd be asleep and you'd hear the attack and you just have to put on whatever you could find to hand. Like, they generally just put on their shirt and run out butt naked from the waist down and just fighting for their lives, because if the base got overrun, they'd all be killed. So my main thing as a child was not, wow, they fought in a war, but naked, that was what I couldn't believe. There's all these guys running around with their dicks swinging around, shooting people. It was like fucking unbelievable.
My son's starting to learn about they're teaching history, to 6-year-olds, so it's very basic history, but I think they've started teaching him or mentioning World War I, and my son's questions about it are hilarious, because it's like you can't really convey how horrific a war is to a child.
Right.
So he thinks that and I guess to some degree he's right. There are sort of rules and stuff around wars, like there's conventions established to prevent or hopefully prevent people from taking things like too far or like against civilians especially and stuff like that. But his questions are all like he thinks it's like a 9-to-5 job sort of thing. And I guess sometimes maybe it is a little bit like that too, because like soldiers have to sleep at some point. But like I get the impression that he thinks that like at 5 o'clock when it's all done, like both teams just sort of hook up and like talk about things that have happened and have these agreements to like with each other, like not to shoot certain things. Like he just can't understand how brutal and savage people can be, you know what I mean? Like especially during a war or in some sort of like combat zone or whatever. Yeah. So it's kind of hard to it's kind of hard to hear in some ways, because you want to correct him and really sort of drum into him that
the world is not a terrifying and a horrible place.
Never ever get in a situation where you have to go to a war, because I would be worried sick and stuff like that. But he's got that childhood innocence and, the sort of ideas he gets from watching cartoons and movies and TV shows.
It's weird because, what? Yeah. It's funny you say that you do get conflict happening a lot even in kids shows. There's generally, it's a battle between good and evil. And the children at a young age have an idea of conflict. When I was a kid, I'm sure you guys were the same. Half the games you played in the playground were war of some kind.
Of course, yeah.
Sides and this and shooting each other and stuff like that. But I wonder what preparation does that really give for when you're 18 and you're conscripted, or 19, as they were in Vietnam, and dropped into battle with this very childlike image of what war must be like. And all of a sudden it's like, oh wait, it fucking sucks. Like it's not fun or action. It's literally miserable, grinding horror for the entire time I'm here. And I could die at any minute. Yeah, I think that's one of the worst things. People's expectation, the way we socialize and normalize war to the actual grim reality, people have no fucking idea. That's why veterans come back and they're like, I literally can't talk to anyone about it because you would not understand.
No, and not just that. Like, even in that documentary, I was surprised because, you hear people that come back from wars and they've got post-traumatic stress, which probably wasn't diagnosed properly back then. Or even in like in the world wars and stuff, but the long-term effects of being in a war, being in combat, taking another life, like all of these things, they fuck you up for the rest of your life.
For real.
There's a guy in the documentary that said that he was so petrified. Some nights they'd sleep in the jungle. And you'd hear whispering all over the place. And it was, Viet Cong, like, moving and whispering. And he was just terrified. And he can't sleep without a nightlight now. Like, for the rest of his life. He's actually, like, a grown man afraid of the dark. And his kids grew up, his babies had night lights. And then they were, like, weaning them off the night lights. And the kids were like, well, how come dad still gets to have a nightlight? And it's like, well, because he's fucking traumatized for the rest of his life.
Your dad's seen some shit, okay, kids? Your dad has seen some shit.
I don't think that people back then, when they signed up, thought about all this stuff. You know what I mean? Like, It's just crazy.
I think everyone war is glamorized to get people to sign up for it, and the people in the know end up dodging the draft like Trump did, with saying he had bone spurs in his foot or whatever, or the rich people end up getting out.
All you need is a good paid doctor to say no, he can't go to war. He got a headache, bad toe, and that bad toe ain't getting any better. You want to send a man into combat with a bad toe? He's going to jeopardize the defensive posture of his entire unit. Grappling about that toe. Here's the situation. It's the middle of the night. He's in the jungle. Ow, my toe hurts. Gives away the position of the enemy. Whole squad lost. Can't send this man to be suicide. Thanks, Doc. Here's $10,000.
Oh, my God.
And I think every war's different as well in horrible ways. No one knows why. No one necessarily knows which. Vietnam was different to Korea, was different to World War II in different ways.
Korea is the forgotten war, man. People never fucking talk about Korea, which is bizarre because it was horrendous.
Korea was a two-parter, though, right? The first part was against North Korea, but then North Korea had China come in and support them, and then and Russia. So I think at first North Korea lost a bunch of territory, and then China sort of came in and said, okay, well, we'll help you take it all back, and then they took it all back, sort of thing. But yeah, you barely ever hear about the Korean War.
It was a very strange stalemate because China didn't want a sort of a US backed country on their border, but they also didn't really want North Korea to be in a way, probably a good. Look at if we, I say we, as in I suppose Britain did actually fight in the Korean War to some extent, but if look at the world we have today with North Korea and South Korea. Obviously, on one hand, we have an incredibly dangerous, crazy. It's mental there. It's just like the Hermit Kingdom. Everyone knows. And in South Korea, look how amazingly successful it's been. I'm looking at this screen with a Samsung monitor. With half of the things in this room are made in.
They make all the fucking container ships in the world as well in Korea. They're pretty much all made in Korea.
It's an amazing success, really, and it's so. War? What is it good for?
And my God, the Korean barbecue is so good.
Oh my God!
To give you guys some idea, in the Korean War, about around 200,000 people died, and 500,000 wounded on the sort of Allies side, if you like, the West. And then about maybe 1 million people on the sort of North Korean side, about the same amount wounded, 2.5 million civilians killed. And honestly, don't think people talk about Korea. Certainly, maybe in America they do, but Vietnam had a much bigger impact, it seems to me.
Well, it's so controversial. I mean,
it was,
it was the first time, really, that there was a massive revolution around it and stuff too, right?
But it's weird. It's weird, isn't it? The two wars very close together in terms of when they happened, and very similar in theme, but in different. The difference was in the way they were fought, I guess. One was more of a traditional, if you like, conventional kind of war. That the fact maybe that Vietnam was this drawn out guerrilla war that seemingly went nowhere, and people were just sent over there, died, and nothing really changed. That sort of was one of the factors, or was Vietnam opposed more because of a change in the mentality of the sort of youth culture, that hippie culture, that counterculture came in, and the civil rights era and everything? Was that what kicked off the opposition to Vietnam? Because why wasn't there the same opposition to Korea? They were materially quite similar wars, for very similar reasons, and between very similar opponents. I just think it's strange.
I think in Vietnam you had a lot of war correspondence, a lot of coverage that might have been different as well. I think. Whereas in the World Wars, there was a lot of press censorship around the kind of stuff that they could report and the things that they could say.
Yeah, maybe.
I don't know if that extended to the Korean War, but in Vietnam, certainly there wasn't any real press censorship, so reporters could go over and just call it as they saw it, sort of thing. So, whilst the military was trying to weave this huge tale about how well they were doing and how close they were to winning and everything. The reporters were coming back and saying, what the fuck are these guys talking about? It's a mess over there. Like, nothing is happening. Nobody is gaining territory or anything conventionally. It's a mess. Like, people are dying all the time. Nobody even knows who the enemy is and stuff. And I think once people started realizing all of that stuff, that's when they really started questioning, like, why are we over there? You know, like, the average American had never even heard of Vietnam before, like, as a country, knew nothing about it.
Yeah.
And then they just sort of started saying, well, what the fuck? Why are we over there? What are we doing? Like, why is it so important? Like, and they'd always just come back and say, well, because we don't want communism to spread. And I guess, like, fair enough, but I don't think it was enough in the end to convince people. I think everybody just got really fucked off.
Just make more shit. Make and sell more shit. That's how you convince people.
Private Dave Gordon woke up in his tent. It was a dark night, as always. The enemy could be anywhere.
Are you reading this or making it up?
He's making it up. Let him go.
He heard an explosion in the camp and quickly got out of his tent without even time to put his pants on. He held his gun and bullets flied around him, killing his friends. But as always, he survived somehow, strangely death avoiding him.
Oh.
Later on that month, he was standing with his pants on in a lake, holding the dog tags of his dead companions, when a sudden shimmering of light appeared next to him, and a skeleton in a robe, holding an hourglass in front of him, appeared. "Oh, Dave," said Death. "It is you. I found this hourglass, and it must have rolled under my desk." Dave said, "I knew that my time was limited here, but thank you, Death. I'm sorry that I have to go now." "Goodbye," said Death. "Goodbye," said Dave Gordon. Goodbye.
Death turned to Dave and said, "I will allow you to write one last letter to anyone of your choosing. Who will it be?" And Dave said, "My mother." And Death said, "Begin writing." So Dave opened up. "Dear mother, here I am with death in Vietnam. Lol. Happy face."
Also filled in because he had the Chrome ad on.
Yes, that sounds awesome.
Just had to hit tab.
I would love to do that! Exclamation mark. Yours forever, Dave.
Dave, P.S. Death is coming for you next. For
fuck's sake. P.S. Death says you're next. Smiley face, lol.
Oh, shit.
All right. Well, that is the Triforce podcast today, guys. Thank you for listening. We'll see you all next week.
We love you all dearly.
Goodbye.
I love you lots. Bye.
Goodbye.
Bye. Bye.